I was 33 years old, well over 400 pounds, and food was my prison. And then I learned that food had the answer to my questions, and my kitchen had the cure for my disease. When I was 400 plus pounds, and I don't have an exact number because I had actually blown past the scales that all had that weight limit. Life was all about the food. I was deeply struggling with a processed food addiction. There was this little voice inside me that said, if you don't do something, you will not make it to 40 years old. And that's when I really just fell in love with the idea of how can I be my best self? So I was fighting for me and fighting for my health. When I went plant-based, my whole relationship with food changed. I realized how much better I was feeling. I feel like I'm firing on all cylinders. That's magic to me. And the weight just sort of slowly melted away, which is something I never thought was possible. Now, food prepping for me is a joy. I celebrate the quality of the food. It's just very rewarding. Healing starts at home. Mine did. And so can yours.
Welcome to the podcast. I'm very excited to welcome a dear friend of mine, Catherine Van Tassel. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Very good. So Catherine and I work together. She's one of our wonderful physician assistants, but she's so much more. I can't wait for you guys to hear her story and how a plant-based diet and just healthy lifestyle has really changed her life. She looks, 19, but I'll let her share her age should she choose to. But yeah, pretty amazing. Well, Catherine, I'm so excited to share your story. Can we just kind of get back and tell us a little bit about your history growing up and what you were dealing with?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. This is really fun. And I always love to talk about all things plant-based and health and mostly because it changed so much for me. And I feel like I wish I would have known it at an earlier age. So the more I can tell somebody and maybe it will help them. So I kind of fell into the world of plant-based lifestyle medicine, essentially because I had watched this documentary before I turned 30. So I'm 43 right now. That's my age. So before I turned 30, I was having a quarter life crisis of, oh my gosh, I'm going to be the dirty 30, and I've got to do something with my life.
I'm in my 50s and I'm apparently not familiar with that terminology. What does dirty 30 mean?
I don't even know. I mean, now having some hindsight on it, I was like, why were we even worried about that? But it was just, I don't know. It's just called
An
the dirty
unhealthy,
30.
it's a sad 30s. Okay, dirty 30s. It's not preferable. I get it. Okay, we'll go with it.
Essentially, you're moving out of your 20s, and everybody thinks their 20s are the best. I have now discovered, and you probably have, that I don't think that's actually true.
No, 20s is just ramping up to the best.
Yeah.
Yes, we totally get you. But go ahead. Yes. So you were trying to get out of your
I was in,
quarter
I was in
life
a
crisis.
crisis.
Fair enough.
And I was watching a documentary called Earthlings, and it was essentially about factory farming. And I was horrified by the things that I saw. And I think, like a lot of people, were just not very familiar with where our food comes from. I went to the grocery store to get chicken and cheese and dairy. I didn't actually see where that came from before the store. And it pulled back the veil, and I have a soft spot in my heart for animals. And I just thought, oh my gosh, you gotta be kidding me. Like, this is awful. And so kind of at this cusp, which, in behavior change, it's always, you make a change when there's a new something coming. So this new decade of my life, my commitment was, well, I'm going to stop eating all animals, and I'm going to go to yoga every day. That didn't happen, the yoga part. But I stopped eating animals. So the reason why this was so powerful, and we can rewind to how this affected me since my childhood, is that when I was a little girl, when I was 2 years old, my parents started taking me to the doctor to see why I was always, and as a child, they didn't know why I was always in pain. They thought that I was getting bladder infections. So they told my parents, like, no bubble baths, she can't take baths. This kind of like proceeded throughout my life, that I would go to the doctor, I would get put on an antibiotic, which now looking back, the years of antibiotics that I was on is terrifying, and what that did to my microbiome. But, this was the answer. Just here's another antibiotic, no bubble baths, all the things that you're supposed to do to try and avoid urinary tract infections. But they were constant and persistent. And as I got older, kept getting worse and worse and worse. And when I was in college, they got to the point where, my mom flew out here. She took me to specialists for weeks to try and figure out what we needed to do, because I just couldn't go on like this. I couldn't go to classes. They gave me a handicap pass because the pain was so bad that I couldn't walk from my car to my class. College campuses, they're big. It's, you have a ways to drive, and I couldn't make it because I couldn't make it from bathroom to bathroom.
Wow.
And that was in my 20s. And in college, I mean, it was a completely disruptful to my life. And I thought, how do I keep living my life like this? I can't do this. So they did everything that they could for it. And they sent me to another specialist who diagnosed me with interstitial cystitis, basically saying that I hadn't had bladder infections my whole life, that my bladder is essentially allergic to itself. So it's an autoimmune condition. And some of the treatments that they give you is a medication. It's called Elmeron. That made my hair start to fall out. So we had to discontinue that medication. They do these treatments where they catheterize you a couple of times a week, and they put a solution in your bladder, and you're supposed to hold it as long as you can. Why they say as long as you can is because it creates a really intense burning, almost like there's a fire somebody just lit in your abdomen. It's incredibly painful. Essentially, that's supposed to shed the lining and create new lining. And I did that with no success. And eventually what they said to me, I had a procedure where they distended my bladder. That didn't work. It actually made it worse. And so what they eventually said is, we're just going to manage this with pain medications. Gave me every script for an opioid that I wanted. And I feel so blessed. I mean, that was before we'd heard about the opioid epidemic. I was in medicine, knew anything about that. I mean, really, all I should have done was trusted this provider and take it. But for some reason in my mind, I was like, I just don't want to do this. I'm, 22 years old. I shouldn't be doing this. So, well, this was later. This is right before I turned 30. So I just kind of suffered for years after that. Then I started going to what I called every witch doctor that I could find. I mean, when I tell you I drove hours to see somebody in their basement with like, who knows what growing from the walls, and they would like take tinctures and mix them up and crush them and put them in capsules. I mean, I was so desperate, I would take anything, and I did. I have no idea what I was taking at that point, but it was like somebody had told me that this person had cured their cancer by using witch hazel. I mean, that's how desperate I got, and I didn't know any other options. So, getting back to the documentary, I watched this documentary. I was horrified about the animals. That was the only reason why I stopped eating meat. And 2 weeks later, my pain that I had had my whole life since I was a 2-year-old was gone. And I couldn't believe it. I just thought,
In 14 days,
yeah.
almost 3 decades worth of suffering.
Yeah. Of pain that I would be like on the floor or in the bathroom for hours and hours and hours. I mean, my best childhood friend growing up, I remember she would sit in the bathroom with me for hours because I couldn't leave. I think about how I lived my life back then, and I can't imagine going back. And at first I thought, this is too good to be true. Like, this must be a coincidence. I don't like, why would this happen? And I didn't know anything about plant-based medicine. And so like, well, I'm not going to look a gift horse in the face. Like, I'm just going to keep going and we'll see what happens. And at this time, I just stopped eating meat. So I still was having dairy, and I was still having eggs. And it still made that big of a difference. And so I never went back, and my pain never came back.
Wow.
And then I just thought, wait, why aren't we telling people about this? Like, what's going on? And so, of course, that then turned into the next 12, 13 years of my life of this deep dive into why would I eat makes such a difference for me and differences in other places in my life. And we can talk about that at some point if
Mhm.
we want to, but that's kind of the back part of that story.
Wow. Geez. So, I mean, I feel like it's such a disservice to summarize that in a matter of, I don't know, 3 minutes of 30 years almost of suffering and pain and suffering. I mean, what did that do for you, like growing up and your confidence and social? I mean, I'm just curious, how was that affecting you, someone with that type of chronic pain and so young and not having a clear even diagnosis till you were older, even?
Yeah. I mean, you know how traumatic events get seared into your brain and you can have these like very clear times in my life. Like in ninth grade, we had ninth grade Lagoon Day here in Utah. That's kind of like going to, it's whatever amusement park. Like it's not as cool as Disneyland, but it's our local amusement park. We get to
Hmm.
go for ninth grade Lagoon Day. And I was having a really bad flare that day and I didn't want to miss out. I wanted to go. It was like one of the biggest things because it was, before you went to high school. And
Mm.
I spent the whole time in the bathroom. And I remember, like, when you're in a lot of pain, how you get hot, like your body gets hot and you'll sweat. It was in the summer, um, and it was hot. And I just remember I was just sweating in the bathroom. And I can remember what I was wearing. I wore this cute denim dress that was in style then, and this red and white striped undershirt. And I remember just sweating through it because I was in so much pain and I couldn't go out and do anything with anybody.
Mm.
Um, and I can think of times when I was dating and I had to come home. And I didn't want to tell them why. It's not like, oh, my back hurts. I don't want to really tell this boy that I have to stay in the bathroom because I can't get out. Um, and I think of nights where I just laid on the floor and it just goes through everything from events that I missed to, not going out to things. And it was awful. It was awful. And of course I joined all these self-help groups online. And I think about women's stories too. I remember hearing this woman, she was flying across the country to go see a specialist. I mean, because people just get desperate with this disease, just like any other, chronic disease. And I remember she was on the airplane and couldn't leave the bathroom in the airplane. And, they were trying to land the plane and trying to get her out. And she was sobbing. And I just like my heart broke for her. And
Mm.
yeah, it's a horrible disease.
Wow. So, how did that lead you? Did you feel like that led you? Was it the plant-based diet that led you to be a PA? Were you a PA before? Like, how did you becoming a physician assistant? Well, you're also
Yeah.
a licensed clinical social worker, so there's that side of you as well. Oh, and we're not even getting into the athletic. Yeah, there's many parts, features to you that are amazing. So let's start with the PA stuff. Where did that come from?
Yeah, so I was working. I went straight from undergrad to graduate school, and loved social work. So that's what I gravitated. I love being around people, and when I was working in social work, which it's so funny because all of these things in my world have circled around each other. So I was working in dialysis. So essentially, people that had kidney failure and had to come into a dialysis clinic and have their kidneys aren't working for them anymore. So a machine does the job of their kidneys, but that's, 4 hours, 4 hours, 3 times a week. Um, Most people, at least in the clinics that I was working in, and I think across the country, um, have renal failure secondary to diabetes and hypertension. And we know that a great amount of those are caused by lifestyle. Um, so I remember having this conversation with a nephrologist and I asked, how many people do you think wouldn't be here if they would have had different patterns in terms of nutrition and exercise? And he said, oh, probably about 75% of my patients. And it like blew me away because again, I keep feeling like I'm not anybody special. Like, why am I hearing all these secrets? Like I'm not the smartest person. I'm not anyone special, but why am I getting this information? Why doesn't everybody know this? Um, and that really affected me. And it affected me in the fact that, I mean, people that are on dialysis, a lot of them can't work. Their families are completely disrupted. They don't feel well most of the time. they have risk of amputations, secondary to their diabetes not getting better. There's just all this sequela that comes from that. And I just kept thinking, why aren't we doing more? Why is the healthcare system not doing more? So then I was like, okay, here's the social work crusade. I'm going to go to PA school and I'm going to go into primary care. And when I'm in primary care, nobody's going to have hypertension or diabetes. Like, that's it. I'm putting an end to it.
Mhm.
And I think that was a very good intended
Mhm.
project. But very quickly I got into primary care and I realized, oh my gosh, this is a huge monster. Our
Mhm.
medical system is a huge monster. And I felt like I wasn't making effective change that way. So I was like, I got to find a different way to do this. So that's what
Mhm.
led me into PA. And then ever since I've been doing that, I've just been looking at avenues to be able to help people in terms of lifestyle medicine.
Mm. Mm. So you had been drawn to the licensed clinical social worker, but you said you're working in a dialysis center. So I'm curious if we could talk a little bit about, just as a segue, a little bit to the depression and anxiety and what you have seen with your work with lifestyle medicine and those type of things with mood disorders. Any improvement, or do you feel, and because I know you like to do research as well, looking into the research of like how many people in chronic disease have depression or anxiety? Because I know it's fairly significant, but what is your take on that?
Yeah. So again, this theme of where everything seems to cross one another. And I think I heard Dean Ornish say this the best, is that a plant-based diet isn't just a diet for somebody who has hypertension or somebody who has diabetes or somebody that wants to be a better athlete. Plant-based diet is for all of these conditions. It crosses over so many things. And at first for me, it was just interstitial cystitis. And then when I was working in dialysis, learning that, well, that could have helped prevented somebody from getting diabetes or hypertension. Um, and then mental health. I think that was probably because the anti-inflammatory aspect of it, that makes sense, right? If you eat
Mhm.
less foods that are anti-inflammatory, I think that's easy to like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And even like, I think in terms of trying just to eat, I never want anybody to feel like unless I'm 100% plant-based, I won't get any of the benefits. You see them making small changes, and those small changes breed, oh, I want to keep doing this more and more. And that's what happened to me. Like, it wasn't, I just stopped eating meat. And then I felt so good. I was like, well, what happens if I stop eating eggs? What happens if I stop eating dairy? And so, um, uh, so anyway, so you're seeing these like improvements in health, and I'm using health as like, okay, let's not think of mental health, even though I do think mental health's health. You can see, oh, this makes sense. But in mental health, I never really made that connection of, well, why would that improve somebody's mental health in terms of depression and anxiety? However, there's so like now that I'm more into it, I can see how there are so many ways that it does. If you were to just look at chronic health, people that have chronic health conditions are at such an increased rate, 50% more of having than a mood disorder, so depression, anxiety. And I think that's multifactorial, and we see that in the research too. One of it is just life circumstance. I mean, if you are caught up in a condition that makes you not feel well and not be able to participate in your community and do things that bring you purpose, of course you're going to have, depression, anxiety. And now we're seeing how that's affecting brain health in terms of inflammation. We're seeing inflammation in the brains, atrophy in the brains. I think one of the, well, there's a lot of cool research that comes out, and this kind of crosses over into another pillar of lifestyle medicine is movement. They were doing trials that were head to head with Zoloft, so one of our first line SSRI medications. So put a group of people into medication and then another group into an exercise class. And at the end of the trial, both people did just as well. Um, so then they were thinking, oh, well, but this group was exercising together, and we know that community helps mood too. So they thought, well, maybe that, that confounded the results. Let's try it again. So they did Zoloft group, exercise group together, and then exercise group alone. Same thing. It didn't matter if you're exercising with people or alone, you still did just as good.
Wow.
They did exercise in patients that had schizophrenia. So there are certain parts in their brain that atrophy. And they noticed that they actually had regrowth in those brains. So the places that had atrophied, they saw a reversal of that. And they also saw that in people that ate certain plants that are high in BDNF or increased BDNF in their brain. So I mean, I could go on and on and on about the research about that, but we're seeing this decreased inflammation in our brain. I always say our brain is just another organ of our body, just like if we had a disease of the heart or the lungs, and that a plant-based lifestyle, and then just the pillars of health in terms of like community and exercise, all of these things that are going into play too in terms of your mental health, everything from psychosis to mood disorders.
Mm. Well, we could probably speak for an hour on any of those topics, but someone may not be familiar with the BDNF. Can you talk a little bit to what that is and what that does in the body?
Yeah,
It's interesting.
yeah.
Very interesting.
It is really interesting. So essentially what they're seeing in this is it helps, I'm trying to think of a good way to explain it. It's like connecting neurons in our brain. So like the way that we process things in our body. So if you can increase that, and the ways that they've shown that is by exercise, fasting, and nutrition. So there's a list of certain foods. Please don't ask me the list off of the top of my head. That increases that. That's why the hypothesis is that they're seeing improvement in mood. And then specifically in the schizophrenia group in terms of atrophy of their brains. They also did a nurses health study on this too. And those that had a higher diets in BDNF, they had improved mood, so lower rates of depression and anxiety.
Yeah, so brain-derived natural, what is it?
Trophic factor.
Yeah, so basically it's just helping growth of nerves and preservation. So what foods would those be? Because I feel like that's going to be a question. If I don't ask you, I will get comments. So go for it.
Remember I said don't ask me that because I can't remember off the top of my head.
I gave you a minute. Come on, man.
I can look it up in my notes.
Here, I can look real quick here. So let's talk. Okay, here we go. Look at this. Thank you. Something. The Amos Institute. Very good. So green tea. It says not look for one source from Japan, not China. Blueberries. Who doesn't love blueberries? Red grapes, olive oil, soy. I'm a big fan of soy. Dark chocolate and blueberries. That's made my day. Turmeric. Let me see, it says here more items here. One sec here. Coffee. Oh, interesting though too, but also lifestyle factors. Speaking of exercise, managing your stress, intermittent fasting, sun exposure, sleep, all the things that we like to discuss. Wow, that's awesome. So if you have someone come and see you, and let's say they're depressed or anxious or some chronic disease, what is the first thing you tell them to focus on? Like, what do you feel like the biggest bang for your buck? So, because you said before, just even small changes make you start seeing those benefits. Where do you feel, because you're kind of our behavior change specialist, are there any things that you think people should look at starting first that makes it easier to transition?
Yeah. So first, when I meet somebody, essentially what I do is, of course, get a good history, but explain. So what I always say is there's this continuum. So there's all these ways that we can treat mental health. So everything from medications, which I prescribe medications all the time. I'm not saying that medications aren't good for you. Sometimes we absolutely need medications and they provide, I'm so thankful for them. But we have all these other options too, that we might not have to use medications. And why would we not want to do that? Well, because all medications that we use end up having side effects, and then we have to treat the side effects. So if we could get to the root cause, of course, that would be ideal, because we don't have side effects. You also don't have to have the cost of the medications. You also don't have to keep seeing your provider for that, because that's disruptive to life. So that's ideal. What's the root cause, and can we address that? And sometimes the root cause isn't, I always say people sometimes are genetically loaded, so meaning they have a long history of depression in their family. And so that does not mean that somebody's condemned to having that, but they just may be more predisposed for that. And then if they have poor lifestyle factors on top of that, it pretty much, flips that switch. But we can look at those factors, then look at what's going on in their life, right? Are they under extreme stress at work? We can't medicate that, right? And we can improve your nutrition that will help you be able to, have better, feeling better in your body and be able to cope better with that. But if you're under this extreme constant stress, that's going to increase your risk factor of chronic disease for so many reasons, right? You get this dump of all of your stress hormones and what that ends up turning into, in terms of chronic disease. So we got to really look at what's happening in your life. And then how can we address this? And sometimes somebody has enough capacity to address multiple things like nutrition and exercise and community, So I'm going to see my girlfriends once a week and I'm going to completely change my diet and I'm going to go to an exercise group 3 times a week. Oh man, that would be amazing. But that's usually not what people can do. So, okay, here are all of our options. The 2 things that I always say that I think have the biggest bang for our buck, if we're going to focus on them first, is either nutrition or exercise. Exercise, if I only have one thing, that really helps because the minute we exercise, we get a dopamine drop in our brain and you get that positive reward right away. So there's a lot of reinforcement in that. And I get a lot, anybody who does that, they get a lot of, okay, I got this. There's a reason why I want to keep doing this. And it becomes, lack of better term, addicting, right? We want this dopamine. And then if somebody's only willing to let go of one thing in their diet, I always say dairy. Take dairy first. Dairy is very inflammatory. Dairy has full of growth hormones. Dairy is 100% of a perfect food. Perfect food, just not for humans. It's meant to grow these tiny, tiny calves into big, huge cows. Nature's perfect food for that, full of growth hormones and all the things to do that. I don't need that. I don't need any of that. So if people have problems with their skin, they notice their skin clearing up, congestion, notice that clearing up, brain fog. That's one of the biggest bangs for your buck. So if I had to choose, just a couple, that would be the 2.
Yeah. So the dairy is by far, I agree with you 100%. People see a significant change in their GI, their skin, which is your biggest organ, right? So when it's red and inflamed, it's like, let's go deeper, right? It's not just a skin issue. So, but also like constipation. I tell you, 100% of kids, if we get them off dairy, we probably have significant improvement in their gut health. And, the poor little people sitting there crying and mom and dad are like, what do we do? So, but I had one little girl and one of my patients, she had really severe case of eczema for years, since birth, 2 months old, till she was a little bit older when I saw her and her mom. And they pulled her off the dairy. Within 3 weeks, completely cleared. A year later, still gone and cleared. And I'll never forget, she's like, Dr. Marbus, I'm not a baby cow. So that's what I tell people. I'm like, you keep on telling them that, sweeties. And so it's such a wonderful thing to hear young people expressing, they understand the nutrition and what that plays in their bodies, and then the exercise. So what is a great segue to your exercise, but let's just move through someone else. Let's say that someone is starting an exercise program. What would you recommend to get started? And then I'd love to have you share your own exercise triumphs, since you went from not being able to walk to your class to running. I'll let you tell. But anyway, please go. Just fun.
Yeah. So I always want movement to be something somebody enjoys. So do they like walking? Do they like group sports, like playing pickleball? Do they like, pickleball, man, that's like we could do a whole talk on pickleball.
Let's just talk about pickleball. Yes. Anyway, keep going.
Do they like to exercise outside, inside? Because that's a good place to start. I don't care how you move your body. it doesn't matter. You're going to get the same effects as long as you just move your body. And if we
Mhm.
can find something that brings you joy, then you're going to do it over and over and over again. So, in terms of like recommending something, really let's find something that you love. And if you don't know, okay, well, let's try a group exercise class at your community rec center. Let's try going on a walk in the afternoon with your dog, or your family. Uh, my husband and I started dog walking after work quite soon after we got married. And I think that was probably one of the best marriage tools that we've
Wait,
ever
for
been
a
given.
job or just for just walking your own dog?
Just walking, like just
Oh.
us walking together.
So you're people and dog walking.
Yeah, yeah. So, um, and then if you can get into some green space to exercise. So we know
Mm.
that research has shown if you exercise in green space, it's kind of like the power booster on exercise. So not only you get that benefit, you get this like extra boost, because our brains respond really well to being in green spaces.
Mm.
So let's find something you love. Let's not tomorrow start an exercise regimen that's not going to let you walk for a week. So if you've not done anything, let's try maybe 10 to 15 minutes a couple times a week. And then the next time we'll do, we can increase that as you go along. And then I always suggest for everybody the importance of doing some sort of weights. Again, you're not in a CrossFit class, you're not out there competing. This can be, you know, so many different ways that you can incorporate weights, but it's so important for your bone health, especially aging bone health, and in women aging in their bone health too. So if we can incorporate some sort of resistance or strength, that's fantastic too.
Mm. Wonderful. Yeah, absolutely. And the interesting, I can't remember what I was reading or it was somewhere when I was traveling last week, but it's called biophilia, right? The love of nature. And they were talking about there's a whole like interior design movement around biophilia. And so I was like looking at all these cool pictures and it totally so I got my first set of plants since moving to California. So I'm like, I can't wait to make this space back here more green. So I'm like, yeah, you just get excited, right? It just you're drawn to that. So it's so very true. Um, but now tell us a little bit about how you started into your athletic career because it's pretty awesome. I mean, geez, traveling the world, all sorts of stuff. So please share.
So when people always say I could never exercise or I could never be like you because they know what I do, I always have to say, okay, listen, you got to sit down and hear me out because I was not an exerciser. Like exercising for me was walking around the mall. Like that was not my jam. And then sometimes I would pick up my mom's Jane Fonda videos, check what that was all about.
Being fun.
That was the best. The grapevine. Oh my gosh. But I wouldn't say this wasn't like a mainstay of my life. And then I was in so much pain. How I couldn't even walk. Like, how am I supposed to exercise? So I didn't start doing this until my 30s. I think that's wasn't like a collegiate athlete or a D2 runner or whatever that, would look like for people that have had sports in their lives. Never played a sport. So I always say careful who you make friends with. I was another social worker was running ultra marathons. And the thought of that, so we're talking about 100 miles. Um, I would have thought it would have been more possible for me to go to the moon than run 100 miles. I mean, honestly, like that, just like, no way. And it didn't start like that day one, but I started getting into movement by just walking. I would walk around my neighborhood and it felt so good, because I was feeling good. I started small jogs. And I mean, I'm telling you, like a mile at most, and that was walking and jogging. But these little habits, this is, exactly why I recommend this. They kind of just build up, and it does become addicting in some way because I'm so much happier and I make better decisions and I have less brain fog. And I just kept noticing how everything kept improving and improving. So then it was like, okay, I'll do exercise classes. And then I signed up for a half marathon. It was the rock and roll half marathon in Arizona. I remember my body had never hurt so much after that. I didn't think it was possible to run for that long. But I did it. And then it turned into this, well, what else can I do? What else can I do? And then I had friends in the ultra running community, and I always did my runs with groups of people. I'm a very social person, and I just got so much from that. And I always said that was like the trifecta. I was outside, I was moving my body, and I had community. So it just became this overwhelming love of my life, essentially, and I didn't want to stop. So in my 30s, I ended up running 100 miles. I still have no idea how that happened. I think it's insane that people do that. Even when I hear other people do that, I think it's crazy. I now have done 200 plus mile bike rides in one day. If in here in Utah, we go from Logan to Jackson Hole. You go through 3 states. I've done multiple Ironman, and I don't say this to like pat myself on the back at all. I say this to, I feel better now in my, being going to be 43 than I ever did when I was 18, 19, 20. Even when I got better from IC in my early 30s, I'm stronger, I'm fitter. I fit into my same clothes I into in high school. I mean, actually probably a little smaller. And this has just all been these gifts that I keep getting from this lifestyle that we stumbled upon. And I want to give it to somebody else because, man, it's changed my life in so many ways.
So explain what an Ironman is, because I think people don't, just in case they're not familiar. Surely they are, but it just blows my mind when people do this.
So you do an open water swim. It's 2.5 miles. And then you ride your bike 112 miles, and then you run a marathon at the end.
All in one day. That's insane.
All in one day.
Yeah. So my husband did his first one at 49. And I'll tell you, it's a remarkable feat of a human to see one swim that far with a bunch of people and legs splashing. And usually it's pretty cold when you guys get started. But then to ride 112 miles, I mean, I ride 10 miles and my butt hurts. I just am impressed. I love the running part, so I get that for sure. But yeah, amazing. Catherine, it's so incredible. And okay, and when she said she got happy, people don't know you. So I don't think they truly understand. So we're in meetings, we Zoom a lot. And she's walking, she's moving on her little thing, and she's smiling and always happy. And she's like always got this energy, and people like feel it emanate through the Zoom, whatever the Zoom universe. like you truly are a happy, loving, you can just feel it person. So it's such a joy. People go like, I just love her energy. It's like, yeah. So if you want some of that, do what she's doing. So
yeah,
really wanted to share with people, like to really emphasize you embody all things that would be what people would be desiring in their life. So, I mean, even with all your tools.
And that's the thing I want people to know. I'm not special. There's nothing about me.
You are special.
No, I mean, if I can do it, other people can do that. And I hear people say that all the time, and I'm like, yeah, whatever. No, really, like, no, really. It's just, and that's the only reason why, I'm always running my mouth. That's never been a problem that I've had, to not have something to say. And I mean, I probably drive a lot of people crazy, but I just keep thinking, I want you to have this too. I want you to have this too.
Oh my goodness, that's fantastic. So you went from pain for decades to not exercising except around the mall. And then now run 100 mile and just a few ultra marathon, like Ironman. Anyway, so there's all of that's Catherine. So what would you say? So someone's sitting here going, yeah, it's good for her. Yeah, I could see that. What would be the first thing you'd like to share with someone who's maybe on the fence or struggling to just get going? Like what would you encourage someone to say? Like, what have you heard that helps?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess I would then turn into an infomercial and be like, I have a money back guarantee. Just give me 30 days. And I'll change your life.
Oh, we need to make a plant-based infomercial. Oh my goodness, that's going to be fabulous.
um I would really, I would say that. I would say challenge to prove me wrong.
Mm,
Prove me wrong, and not in a like, oh, I know all the right answers. I have seen it in my own life, but I've seen it in so many other people's lives, and it's story after story after story, and people that feel the same way as me. Why didn't I know this? Why did nobody tell me this? So
mm,
honestly, I would take, I always say I would pick nutrition or exercise. If you can do a little of both, that would be great. And just try it. And
mhm,
and it can be, again, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be 100% bought in. You can be, that's great. But okay, what if it was just meat? That's just what you were going to give up, or just dairy. Just try that and make one step at a time. Um, and if you can, find somebody to do it with you, like support and community, and accountability. That's always much more fun to make change that way. Pick a date that means something to you. So maybe it's your birthday, like it was my birthday, or maybe it's spring or fall, or Christmas. What New Year's is the biggest one. Pick this date that means something to you, of I'm going to make a change, and why am I going to make that change? So I love lists of writing things down. What do I want to gain? What would this potentially help me do? And then I would probably say, I have lots of things to say this, but I would probably say the last thing would be, if you're investigating something like this, it's because something's not working for you. So what do you have to lose? What you're doing already is not working. And if you keep doing that, it's probably just going to get worse. So what if you tried something else? And then just gather the evidence. What did I find out about this? How do I feel? How's my mood? How's my sleep? I mean, we haven't even tapped into how sleep's affected by this.
mm.
And just be super curious about it, and no judgment around it. You can always go back, always, if you wanted to. It will still be there, I promise. Um, but just be super curious about making changes and how it affects your body.
Mm. Yeah, I would say curiosity should be your superpower.
Mhm.
And excuse me, Jed Brewer and I've had lots of conversations about curiosity as a superpower, and it really holds true because that's what little kids do, right? They get themselves into trouble all the time. So let's get ourselves into
Mhm.
a little good trouble and go searching this out. It really is remarkable, the stories, right? There's no negative side effects
No.
other than, oh shucks, we're going to lose some weight. Oh shucks, we're going to feel better. Oh shucks, I got to stop some medications and cut off some chronic disease from my life, which kind of gives a great segue. So Catherine and I work at Mora, and you guys check it out, mora.com. We have, and Catherine was very, very instrumental in helping us get started, and is still part of our team and helping us grow in all sorts of ways. And this is a place you can find physicians and physician assistants and peers support through physician-led groups. We call them circles. And check us out. Check it out at mora.com. Right now we're working in the state of Florida, soon to launch in Texas and California. There'll be other states added. So but definitely check us out. And what would you say about Mora, Catherine, that you'd like anything there to share?
Yeah. I mean, when you talked to me about being involved in this, I just thought, oh my gosh, it just keeps crossing. It keeps crossing. I felt like
Well,
this
that
is like
comes because we go back 2 years, right? You emailed me about plant-based telehealth. I was like, we're not there yet. But then I just went digging through the emails and there your name was. And who knew?
I know, this is why you just have to put your intentions out there into the universe,
Yes.
and it will come back to you.
Yes.
Um, I think there's so many reasons why I like Mora, but it goes across so many things that I was talking about,
Mm,
right? You get community by being with other people there. You don't feel so alone, which I think is so important. I felt so alone for so many years. Like I was the only person with this. Nobody else in my school was in the bathroom all of Lagoon Day,
mm,
everybody's out having fun. Everyone else can take bubble baths. I always wanted, like, remember that like peak think
Oh
it's like a
yeah.
guy or something. Yeah,
Yeah, it was
I
like
could
the
never have
bubble.
that.
It was the
Yeah,
bubble face. Yep.
yeah, like everybody else gets this and I don't.
Mm.
And I think it's so nice to be in a community where other people can say, yeah, I feel this too. This is hard.
Yeah.
Um, and so you get that. And then also you don't know what you don't know. So okay, exercise. What does that actually mean? Eat
Mm.
better. Oh, sure. Okay. What does that mean?
Right.
We have so many ways of eating better in this world now. Is that ketogenic? Is that carnivore? Is that plant-based? Is that, there's even plant-based keto. I mean, if you look at all the diet books that are out there, there's everything from the maker's diet, which is based on, I guess, what Jesus ate,
Mm-hmm.
to the cookie diet, to the be thin now diet. I mean, no wonder people don't know how to nourish themselves. So the fact that you get to go in this group, be with other people, and then actually be provided with, here's how to do it. And we're going to provide education on nutrition and exercise, stress management, mindfulness, community. And you get this for 12 weeks. So you can move through it together and have
Mm-hmm.
time to implement those things in your life.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like everything packaged up into one. I wish I would have had that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we accept Medicare. We're working on the other insurances. We're super close to several there in Florida. And if not, there's also a cash pay option. It's actually very minimal. And so, we're doing our best to make this available to as many people as possible. So if this doesn't work for you, maybe share this with someone else, but check it out at mora.com. But yeah, there's so much to that. And Catherine, I can't say thanks enough for sharing your story. You're always such a delight to talk to. So I was really looking forward to today. I was like, oh, get to talk to Catherine. I'm like, for 45 minutes or more. This will be great. I think I've already gone over 45 minutes. But yeah, this has been fantastic. And I really appreciate your time and your transparency and sharing your story.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be in this community.
One more question. Just don't let
Yes.
me. I forgot to ask you what you eat in a day, because if I don't ask, I get comments. Right to self. I cannot have angry listeners. So please tell me what you eat in a day.
Okay. Every morning I have a smoothie. So I always exercise in the morning because I feel like it sets my day up good and I feel better. So after I exercise, I have a smoothie. It always has 2 vegetables and a fruit in it. And then usually some flax and um, I put oat fiber in it, chia seeds, all the basically the formula that I always tell people when they're building a plate is a veggie. Fruits are decoration, so it's always in my smoothie in the morning, but you don't have to put that on every plate. So a veggie and some sort of good, healthy, slow processing carb, and some sort of protein and fiber. If you can add all of those together, that's a great combination. So that's what goes in my smoothie. I always have a salad for lunch. I prep them out on Sunday, so I don't even have to think about it. It goes with me to work. And then for snacks, usually like hummus and carrots, maybe a piece of fruit, and then occasionally nuts. I try to steer away from those because I can eat too many of them and they're really calorically dense. Um, and then dinner, gosh, that's everything from like doing it's zucchini season. If you have a zucchini plant, you're basically being overgrown by them. So spiraling zucchini and mixing that with a whole wheat pasta. I have celiac disease, so I have to do gluten-free, like a chickpea pasta or something like that. But there's pastas that have made with beans now, and so you get some protein in that, a veggie. So doing like a pasta that way. Doing stir fries. I really like stir fries at night. Or if I just want it to be super easy, baked sweet potato, roasted broccoli, and then like either a bean or some tofu.
Nice. Very solid yumminess going on there for sure. I got a bunch of broccoli and cauliflower in there. I got to figure out what to do with. But I was watching earlier the Whole Food Plant-Based Kitchen YouTube channel. Her name's
Yeah.
Jill. I haven't interviewed her, which I might reach out to, but she had some cheesy broccoli soup. I was like, that sounded delicious. So anyway.
Oh, I know. There's so many Instagrams,
Oh my
blogs, cookbooks, and you can make it as simple as easy or as easy as you want. Just
Or
depends on what you
decadent
want to
and
do.
amazing. Yeah. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. Anyway, All right. I did my duty, guys. I asked her what she ate in a day because I was like, I knew there was something. But again, thanks again, Catherine, for your time, and we really appreciate all that you've done and do for people.
Thank you. It's so good to be here.
Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed that video. Before you go though, please hit the subscribe and alert buttons so you don't miss out on any of the amazing content we're working so hard to provide you. We upload a new episode of Health and More with Dr. Lori Marbus every Friday. Now, if you'd rather listen to the podcast, you can find us on all the major platforms such as iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, and even Spotify. If you're looking for amazing resources to help you start and sustain a plant-based diet, exercise, recipes, or anything wellness, we got you covered there too. Because at Mora, we actually provide physician-led support groups to help people live happier, healthier lives free of metabolic disease. Don't forget to check out our website at mora.com, and thanks again for watching.